The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Mike, we are live.
Okay, so welcome everybody to the October edition of the ISCDO series, How CDOs Succeed. Now, we've been very lucky throughout this series to have a large number of high-value topics that we've had, and I think you'll find that today is no exception. But first, who is the ISCDO? Now, the ISCDO is a group of data leaders born out of the MIT CDO IQ Symposium, and its offshoots now in Lausanne in Switzerland and soon to be in Singapore. And we're a group of data leaders who try to bring a wrap around our fellow leaders. It's a global community that looks to support each other with ideas, with new developments, with events such as this, with some local events as well. And it's all about taking forward the ideas of leadership in data to a broader community and supporting those people who are moving into those roles. And I urge you to come and see us, to join, to see how we can help, how you can help sustain people. So today we have fortunate to have, next slide please, our webinar on the key elements of a data strategy, and that's presented by Craig Suckling, who, as you can see on screen, is the head of data strategy for strategic industries. That's a heck of a title at Amazon Web Services. Now, Craig is a bit of a data star with a background having set up one of the first AI companies in Southern Africa that brought together business and the customers, and has since moved on through a series of strategic roles, including in one of the big four consultancies, to a role as head of data at IAG, and then strategy roles, moving up through the sort of levels within our Amazon Web Services, where he currently enjoys his current, too many currents, but he is filling his current role in that he is the head of data analytics, artificial intelligence and machine learning. I think we'll find that he has a background not just in strategy, but across the sort of the leadership roles in organizations, from setting up, creating organizations, to advising, to leading, that will bring a really sort of expansive and deep understanding of the key elements of data strategy. And Craig, you are very welcome to join us today. And I, for one, am waiting to hear what you have to say. Over to you, Craig.
Thank you very much, Mike, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and to join you all and share some of my perspectives and experience with everyone today. So just to check, Mike, can you see the screen that I'm sharing?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic. We're off to a good start. So welcome to be with you all today. Thank you for having me here today, guys. As Mike was saying, my name's Craig Suckling. I'm the head of data strategy at AWS. And within this role, having been here at AWS for a number of years, I've had the distinct pleasure to work with so many different customers across many different industries as they've lent into driving business value, customer differentiation with data, analytics, and AI/ML, executing strategies to be able to scale data across their organizations and really differentiate and sometimes disrupt in industry. And so I'm keen to share some of the learnings we've seen for how these customers of ours have approached what we call a modern data strategy, the considerations and the key elements of that, and just share some of the learnings and some of the key considerations as you might reflect yourselves around how to start to drive that next iteration of change in your organization, how to unlock that next wave of value as you start to lean more into your own data strategies. So with that in mind, the agenda we're going to circle through over the next 45 minutes or so is essentially going to cover across these 4 topics. And they're all important components that we see that need to come together when you think about change with data in your organization. We'll talk about mindset and how having the right data mindset, the right cultural understanding of the value of data across the organization is important. We'll jump into people, how to organize for innovation at scale with data. We'll think about process and how to have agility while still remaining compliant and transparent in usage. And then we'll talk about technology a bit as well. And we'll jump into modern architectures and some of the patterns and templates we're seeing to really drive scale, but flexibility that meets with the pace of business needs as well. That's a bit of what we'll think about. And as you can see, we had a bit of fun here with an equation, but we see these things having to come together, and technology is the compounding factor that really drives change across these other areas. So what does it mean to be data-driven? The term is a horrible cliche across all industries right now, being a data-driven company. And the way that we tend to think about it when we see those that are being successful, that work with us at AWS, like I've been saying, it really is a multitude of factors that come together. The first of those is where is time spent? And so we see customers that do well invest in accessing and creating time to focus on solving for customer and business priorities, rather than investing what we often call undifferentiated heavy lifting in finding and accessing data, removing those roadblocks to be able to access data quickly at a high quality so that they can focus more time on actually thinking about how that data can add value to the customer. And there's a great quote from Dykes and Brent around, if you could increase just 10% on data accessibility, the typical Fortune 1000 will see a $65 million increase in income. So focusing and shifting to where time is spent by investing in automation to help to drive more accessibility to data is key. Secondly, when you think about how decisions are made, it's about driving test and measure cycles of data, forming hypotheses with data, and then using data to gather feedback around how products are being utilized in markets, into business customers or into end customers, and continually evaluating that to continue to optimize how you deliver data out. And Netflix is a great example of that. They conduct over 33 million experiments on their product all the time, trying to drive out a better viewer experience, for their audience. And it really is something that needs to be embedded deeply into the culture of an organization as well. And when you think about using data to make decisions, an anecdote we used to have in Amazon, it wasn't uncommon for managers to have signs on their door which said, in God we trust, all others bring data, essentially. And whilst that's just a small kind of little phrase, it really does, emphasize the fact that if you're coming forward with an idea, if you think there's a great opportunity, you best bring data with it, because that's the culture that's required to really drive optimal decisions. If you think about how work gets done, decentralization of decision-making is the great way to kind of break bottlenecks in making sure that multiple teams can access and use data and serve the business directly at pace. And Amazon's a good example of that. They have 2,400 teams, all independently innovating with data. We refer to them as 2 pizza teams because you can essentially feed them with 2 pizzas. But these are missionary focused, singular teams with a single kind of objective. They're cross-functional in nature. So they have engineering, analytics, machine learning, resources in that single team, all working together with a high focus and a high autonomy to be able to drive certain challenges in the business. You think about how technology is built, and it's about adapting to business priorities, investing in loosely coupled, interoperable components across your architecture, and delivering purpose-built data stores that allows for you to deliver the right insight and intelligence to the business within the right way. Formula One's a good example here. They are constantly reiterating and refining their data platform, which ingests over 1 million different data points from different sensors across the track, across their cars, across the championship in general that they drive each year, no pun intended. And each year as the championship rules change, they're constantly flexing and thinking about the different data parameters that they need to be able to ingest and incorporate to inform how they drive out more competitive kind of profiles in the race. You think about how data is perceived, and it's about products, not platforms. And again, this is a big mindset shift. It's about thinking about data as a collective asset, not just owned by technology, but it is something that all of business needs to be accountable for and needs to be responsible across business lines. And so shifting away from data being served through a platform to a business to data being the responsibility of everyone in the organization and taking a product mindset to that is really important. And Engie, they're a French utility organization. They have a great kind of story around what they've done here, and we'll jump into that a bit later, but they've been able to create what they call a common data hub. That doesn't mean that they've centralized data, but it means that they've created common products that are uniformly accessible across all of their different business units. And finally, all of these pieces are coming together to really drive value as well. There's a good IDC study that talks about the value seen from investing in analytics and data lakes with AWS, and it's certainly tangible value that comes out of this. So let's double click a little bit into some of these areas, and we'll start with mindset. We'll share a bit more on each of these as we go. And I should have said earlier, we're going to save some time at the end for some questions as well. So please do put some questions into the chat as we go. We'll make sure we hit on some of those towards the end as well. Okay, so if we talk about mindset, there's a few things to unpack here. We spoke earlier around creating the capacity to focus on business value and moving away from undifferentiated heavy lifting. When we think about this within Amazon, we think about this in terms of creating flywheel effects. And you'll see this picture here on this slide. It's all about identifying those high value, key priority challenges or opportunities in the business. Here we call these products that we can deliver really quickly in collaboration with the business and technology to deliver a really good customer experience fast, but importantly to get feedback quickly as well. And the idea here is to have a think big vision, but to start small and show value quickly in key relevant areas that engage the business, start to create more appetite to want to do more with data. So not only are you delivering a technical product, but you're changing mindset by delivering value where it matters. And you're starting to create a better understanding of what it's like to use and apply data into your most priority challenges. And all of that feedback helps you to learn more and more on how that's working, to be able to deliver more data and more products into the business and to scale really quickly. And the idea is, as you traverse through this flywheel faster and faster, you gain momentum, you create capacity, because no longer is the business having to worry about munging together data, understanding where the source is coming from, lacking trust in the quality. They start to become more elevated in what they do. And that transforms across people, tech, and process. It creates capacity so that the business can experiment more broadly, can have time to innovate more, can drive even more intelligent products through this as a cycle. So that's the idea when we think about the approach to changing mindset. And like I said, it's about starting with a think big goal, setting those visions, but then focusing on delivering business priorities fast. And we often say, don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. Don't spend 8, 12, 16 weeks trying to think of every single use case under the sun that's across your business where data can add value. Identify those key priorities and get moving, show value, and then iterate and scale as you go. And a couple of other considerations here just to unpack. So it's important as you do that to make sure that there is leadership conviction. Change requires top-down direction, and that needs to come from both business and IT. And that messaging needs to be that data is more than just a technical problem. Like I said earlier, one of the successes of being data-driven is an acknowledgement that data is actually part of the business's responsibility as well. That messaging needs to come top-down. But at the same time, you want to get bottom-up. Those first teams that come together and unlock value with some of those first use cases, they start to collaborate in a different way. You start to connect data products across both producers that create that data and those consuming teams that consume the data. And those first teams are the evangelizers for the rest of the world, the rest of your organization, to see a different way of working. So celebrate the successes of those first teams, share them out so that others can start to gain appetite to want to also lean into this. And finally, you do need to ensure that the right skills are embedded as well so that people can lean in. And this is not just engineering and technical skills. Focus as well on creating those data literacy skills, understanding how to tell the right stories with data in the context of the business so that they can act on it and ensure that your business is equipped with those skill sets. And then finally, I often refer to these things as big rocks. Don't leave them for later. Focus on them right away and do them in a minimal way, even if you start to drive transformation. And those are things like privacy, security, compliance, and governance. These are big horizontal topics that go across many different use cases. And you want to solve for them early, because if you try to do this later, it's very hard to solve later on down the line. Okay, so those are some considerations. And like I said, the flywheel approach we see as being really effective to driving change by gaining momentum. I'll give you a bit of an example as well. We worked last year with an organization called Beauty Bay. If you're not familiar with them, they're an online beauty retailer. They have a footprint of customers across Europe, Asia, and the US. And through the pandemic, they found themselves growing really rapidly. They're known as being a really fresh and young brand. They're known to bring products to the market before some of the big mainstream retailers. And they were worried that as they were growing, that they would be losing their differentiating edge on how they knew their customers, how they served them in the right way. And so they turned to data as a key way for them to be able to scale while still understanding the nuances of different customers around the world and proactively understanding how best to keep serving them with the best and freshest products in cosmetics. So we helped them to kickstart their flywheel last year. And the beginning for this was helping them to just start small with a simple solution around just understanding the commonalities of how customers come together to engage across products, the different inventory and sales attributes, and a single understanding of the different customer events and profiles as well. And we worked with their marketing teams to be able to embed this insight, to understand trends and demand patterns so they could be more proactive in delivering personalized communications and in understanding the different ways that their customers engaged socially as well as wanted to engage with the brand. They were able to deliver value in this first small use case within 6 weeks, fully built, deployed in production. And they immediately started to see increased engagement, better sales value, shopping basket volumes went up. Importantly, the marketing team was really bought in to working with data and started to drive a different mindset for how they applied data into how they activated on delivering a communication and engagement out into their base. And they didn't stop there. By being able to share that with their board, they were able to secure investment and value to start to drive multiple additional use cases. So their second flywheel turn then took them to thinking about demand sensing and pricing and how they could start to see in real time the interplay as demand started to spike on their site for different products and how that was changing different price points for them as well. And they were able to scale personalization across channels. They started to embed better personalized experiences into social channels, into their web, into their app, into their emails. And again, they drove more sales, more profitability. And they're continuing to go. They're working through their business value chain. They started with marketing. On their second turn, they looked more around pricing and demand. They're now looking at merchandising and how the connection between customer demand, customer patterns of wants should inform how they do more agile buys and how they procure merchandise faster. And so they're starting to think about how they then drive data more through their supply chain as well. And that's a transformative effect of kind of like flywheels where you're building to show value, but you're creating minimal capabilities that are scalable across multiple business use cases. And over time, you gain economies of scale, allowing you to go faster and faster as you go. And Beauty Bay is a great story and an example of how they were able to affect that change throughout their organization. Okay, we'll jump into people and process, and let's kind of change gears a little bit, talk a little bit more around how these two components need to come together to really drive out what I like to say, innovation at scale with data across the organization. And, I'm sure everyone is seeing this as a trend. I thought it would be worthwhile just framing it here. But, we see this with many of our customers today that much in the same way that technology over the last 5 to 10 years has gone through a revolution, moving away from monolithical IT applications to microservice-based, architectures. We're seeing organizations and the way communities for data across organizations work following a similar shift, moving away from centralized teams around data to federating out, decoupling responsibility, and allowing for autonomy and use of data while still allowing for interoperability across the organization as well. So we're seeing this great shift, and we refer to this as our modern data community, essentially. And so we see many customers leaning into this. Amazon.com and their retail business, they run this across all of their organization. And we see other customers that we'll touch on today, like Angie and BMW, JP Morgan Chase, they're all leaning into this as a model, which they see as being really effective to break the bottlenecks on how you innovate with data. And the way it works essentially is by pushing responsibilities to the edges of the screen. And so essentially what that means is you will have multiple teams across your organization who produce data. And you want to give those teams the accountability and the responsibility to own and govern their own data, because they know it better than anybody else, and they can go really deep in it. They live and breathe that data, giving them the autonomy to own it, govern it, make sure that the quality is right, and then to be able to tag it with the right business and technical tags so that others in the organization can see it and it can be made available to be used wherever is required. And on the other end of this equation is that consumer side. So all of those, what we refer to as two pizza teams, but all of those teams that are sitting in the business, wanting to consume data, wanting to use data to meet with the needs of their particular business areas, they're able to search, discover, subscribe, and access data and use it within the environment they require to drive out the insight they need within their business. So it's all about pushing out this accountability. And then your central team, your core technology team has a very different shape in this model. They're focused on creating a platform of interaction, allowing for an ecosystem where producers and consumers can come together. And their job is focused on building the right security controls, creating that platform to be as easy to use as possible, simplifying the onboarding, making producers' lives really easy to lean in. And they do still have a focus on some enterprise data sets, but that's in the majority for some critical, highly relevant or important sets of data. And their other focus then is on training and community. And so they're there to understand where different consumer teams are using data to innovate in different ways, creating different products, and where there might be cross benefits in sharing that, sending feedback to producer teams around how they can optimize the data they're making available. So this is an ecosystem, essentially. And so, a key thing to this as a model, and this is a great end vision, a key piece to this is maturity. And so many organizations are on a journey where they're trying to increase maturity across producer and consumer teams so that they can start to be more accountable. Now that takes time. And so this is something that you want to work on over time by, identifying first key teams. Comes back to the flywheel, first priority business initiatives, where you can start to establish and push out accountability. And then you start to scale this over time over the wider organization. We see it as being really important. I mean, I'm an ex-chief data officer from industry, and back in my life, I've set up a couple of data teams, in my past. We'd often start by creating a central team to be able to create commonalities in assets, pool best practice, and make sure that there's better control, especially if data has been fragmented or siloed across the business. And that's often the right place to begin. What I would often find, though, is that as the business started to see value from that centralized team, pooling of best assets, they would immediately increase their appetite and want for more data. And very often their demand would outstrip the pace in which we could fulfill it. And often you'd see, the business would ask a question of us, and by the time we gave them the answer, the question had changed. And so the idea here is to break that bottleneck in centralization, because it's really hard today with the amount of variety and volume of data that we have across our organizations to go deep in driving good quality on that and to go fast in delivering out to business needs from a central place. And so the answer here is to start to federate, to break out those bottlenecks more. We'll talk a little bit about Engie. I mentioned it earlier. They're a great example of this. Essentially, like I said, they're a utility organizations, and they've got a big ambition to become zero carbon, within the next 10 to 15 years. And so they've accelerated this transition, and data played a big part in this. They're investing in a lot of renewable energy assets. And for Engie, what's key for them is they go across many different geos and regions. And so they have to have real specific relevance in market wherever they operate. They need to comply to regulatory rules, and they need to work within the relevance of their different customers in different geographies. But they also want to pull together best practice around optimizing the cost on assets, being more predictive around when an asset like a wind turbine might need to be switched off for maintenance, understanding where hairline cracks might be forming that would erode the blade and ensure that they, can be more proactive in doing preventative maintenance as well, and ensuring that their turbines are running to maximum effectiveness on energy and utility as well. And so these were all, learnings that could be applied more commonly in terms of best practice of asset usage, but still allowing for relevancy in market. And so they created a common data hub, which allowed for them, across 351 different projects to pull together data across asset usage, allowing for all of these different business units across their different markets to access these common assets around how to predict on maintenance, how to predict on wear and tear, but to use that within their own relevant data sets as well. And so, NG's view on this has been really, transformational for them in just being able to optimize on cost and have the agility to operate in local markets while still having standardization, at the scale of their business. Jump a little bit more into the makeup of some of these two pizza teams that I keep on going on about. And so these are these teams that sit in the business. And, to bring this into more of an example, if we're in a bank, you might have a team that's very focused on fraud, for example, and they're effectively looking at focusing on being able to predict patterns of fraudulent transactions and then to proactively act on those so that they're shut down quickly and remediate risk within the bank. To have that in place, you need a team that really understands the fraud business, that really understands customers and the patterns that might be, tricky to detect, whilst minimizing false positives in detecting pieces as well. And so the idea of a two pizza team is to bring together product owners and scrum masters, business analysts who really understand the business, who have then hold the vision for what the business is trying to do in a particular area, like fraud. And they partner and work hand in hand with data specialists, data analysts who are really deep in understanding fraud-specific data scientists who can run the models, and engineers who can create the pipelines, and visualization experts who can create the insight and the dashboards that business owners can use. But the idea here is that they are an autonomous, single-threaded team embedded in the business, acting through a single leadership remit to focus on particular business opportunities. And they're there to be able to work and serve the fraud team, but they work through that broader modern data community. So they might plug into a number of different producers, and they might use data from across the business, but they're able to access that through a common marketplace, and they're able to use it in a common way. So that if there are teams, and there could be a two pizza team, let's say in customer service, accessing the same customer data products as the fraud team, there's commonality in the type of customer, the type of treatment that they're receiving, who they are across these different teams as well, even though they're independent. So that's the idea. I'll talk to Amazon for a second, because like I said earlier, they're also doing this across their business. And so Amazon.com, we treat them as any other customer. They're a separate business to AWS. And when I say Amazon.com, this goes across the breadth of their, supply chain and fulfillment centers, all of their Prime, Music, Alexa, Twitch businesses. And so it's a vast business with lots of different complexity, lots of different areas doing different things. And so they were on a journey back in 2018 where they moved away from their on-premise data platform onto AWS. And as part of that, they imagined a marketplace much like how a shopper would interact on Amazon.com. They wanted to have consumer teams to be equipped with the ability to easily search and discover different products, data, rather than books, and to be able to understand what that data product was about. And then if they liked it, to put it in a shopping basket and check out and use it. And on the other side of this, they wanted all of those people that existed in the marketplace as suppliers, producers of data, to have the ability to make their products available for people to use. And so they deployed this, and they operate what they call their Andes marketplace across the extent of their business, serving 800 teams, 1,800 teams producing data across that extent, and nearly 4,000 teams now analyzing and acting on data as consumer two pizza teams. And so again, just another example of how through a complex business that has many different operations, creating these common data communities and marketplaces really helps to create scale in accessing and using data to drive value across the organization. So we've spoken quite a lot around people and organization models. I mean, there are other elements to people and process to be considerate of as well. And so when you think about this, you also need to be thinking about funding and value. Oftentimes, customers we work with, they focus on, highly tuning their organization to be agile, but they operate within funding cycles that are annual. And so even though they're able to move really quick, they only have access to the funding to do so once a year. And so they're doing a waterfall funding cycle over an agile organizational model. And so much in the same way that we see decentralization benefiting organizational thinking, funding benefits for decentralization where it's differentiating. And so what I mean by that is where you have those teams that are focused on innovating at a rapid clip, delivering, if you're a B2C business, personalized recommendations out through apps and through different customer channels. Or if you're sitting in supply chain and you're constantly needing to identify risk points of failure in your supply chain that you need to remediate around. Those are teams that are creating differentiating skills, differentiating value for your business really quick. Decentralize the funding and give them the autonomy to match that where it's differentiating. And for other areas that might be moving at a slower clip, like some of the back office functions in finance, they can operate towards more of a centralized model on funding. Then think about where fidelity matches maturity. And what I mean by that is when you think about setting out business cases to motivate for funding, do so at the right level that matches the maturity of your idea. Don't drain the ocean, don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. Do enough on the business case to drive enough certainty, and think about outcomes over outputs. Think about the value you're trying to drive rather than the volume of delivery that you're trying to do and just putting products out there. And so this interlocks back into organization. We've covered a number of these points: decentralizing, creating cross-functional teams, ensuring that they're autonomous and empowered, but with responsibility. It comes back to this point that maturity is a key piece to all of these, topics. Look where there is maturity in your business to start to lean into this more, and where there's less maturity, keep things more centralized and focus on growing out maturity so you can decentralize over time. And governance follows a similar trait. So think about how you can automate with guardrails rather than creating really bureaucratic manual processes around governance. And so look at using things like machine learning, to be able to detect personal information, creating more automated ways to look at consumption of different data products and use of analytics tools so that you have more transparency in an automated fashion. And we'll talk a bit more of that about that in a second with some customer examples. But look to automation to help to drive agility in governance as guardrails rather than driving, too much of a hindrance with bureaucratic process. And use tenets and good management. Comes back to maturity again, where you have those teams in the organization that are highly mature in data, rely on their good management sense to do the right thing, and equip them with tenets to make decisions quickly around how they should use data, rather than bogging them down too much. Okay, so that's a little bit just around some of the considerations on people and process. I'll talk to Roche for a second because they're a great example of operating a global data platform at scale whilst remaining compliant in a highly regulated industry. And it comes back to this point of automation of guardrails for governance. They've been able to scale out a platform across the extent of their global business, which really uses, a lot of machine learning to be able to sense and detect and classify sensitive patient information, sensitive research information, aggregate that or mask that, allowing for research collaboration across the globe, allowing for all sorts of different health facilities to be able to gain access into demographic, patient health research data in an anonymized way. And they're able to do that in a really agile, quick way because they don't have manual governance, and manual processes of approval trying to find and detect particular quality issues or particular sensitive areas. They've invested in analytics and machine learning to be able to really drive this out in a quick way. And they're able to do so whilst remaining compliant with things like, GDPR in Europe and HIPAA and any other compliance kind of regulations they need to adhere to. This has allowed for them to really drive out automation and agility really quickly across their business. So I'll gladly share more on Roche if anyone's interested. We can share some of these blogs. They're available online as well. Okay, so we've spoken a bit about mindset. We've talked about people and process. We're going to jump into technology now and talk a little bit more around how that underpins a lot of this as the driving force. So when we think about technology, we tend to think about this as what we call a modern data strategy in action, essentially. And the idea here is that you want to invest in an architecture and a solution that is loosely coupled, allows for interoperability in sharing information across a number of different services, and allows for flexible scaling as well. You want to think about minimizing duplication of data, keeping data stored where it exists, and allowing for that to be accessed seamlessly anywhere. And so you see some of the components in here in the central kind of bubble, having a centralized catalog and governance that allows for you to have transparency across wherever data might be stored is really important. It comes back to that point of, if I'm a consumer out in the business, having the ability to search and subscribe and discover to data through a central catalog that goes across wherever the data might be stored across the organization really helps for transparency and common use in data. And then allowing for data to be delivered and stored wherever it might need to be by those different producers. You know, we see different use cases for different things, but data lakes will drive that low cost, really effective storage of data, you know, across the organization. But then you'd want to invest in different toolkits for different business functions, analytics to suit more descriptive insight, to create more, you know, unstructured analysis that you might want to look at across maybe sentiment on customer, and machine learning to be more predictive and prescriptive and to try and understand more future forecasting use cases, whereas databases might be more around low latency, quick analytical uses, often used in areas like supply chain potentially, where you need to be really quick in understanding how data is flowing through some of your business processes. But the idea here is make data available fluidly across the organization, store it once, don't replicate, and allow for interoperability, and then for the right tools to be made available for your people, apps, and devices to consume in the way that they need best. So these are some of the components we see coming together across a modern architecture, if you like. So I'm going to give you an example of this as well. JP Morgan Chase, you know, they're a great example of creating and refreshing their architecture to deliver something that's more modern and allowing for more autonomous use across their organization. And so, as you know, JP Morgan Chase, they're a big, multifaceted bank. You know, they have a lot of complexity. They have a lot of different parts to their business. They operate on a global scale, and they operate in a highly regulated environment as well, which they need to constantly comply with. They need to show, you know, results back to audit. They need to make sure that they're staying compliant to all of the different privacy and banking rules worldwide as well. And so for them, what they've done is they've invested in a data mesh technology, a data mesh architecture that has allowed for them to create accessibility for all of the different data that resides across their bank. And for them, it was really important, you know, they realize that there's value in data, but they realize that there's even more value in combined data, in understanding how data comes together across different parts of their business and allowing for that to be accessible into the right teams. But they needed to balance that with the ability to still ensure that they were adhering to restrictions on use, transparency and security, and making sure that regulatory compliance was in place as well. So they employed a mesh catalog that went across all of their different data lakes that exist today. And they were able to categorize up and classify all of their different data across these, allowing for different consuming applications to have the access to be able to consume and serve that data in an independent way. And importantly, through that mesh catalog, their central technology team can still see who's using the data, where it's come from, you know, how often that data is used. And so they're able to very quickly report back on security, on consumer access requests, and they have transparency and usage across the bank at the same time as allowing for federated use in these different applications. So the other thing that they've been doing through this as well is they've had to do further thinking around how they change the shape of the data that sits in all of their different existing data lakes, moving towards more of a product-centric design and giving the teams that own those data lakes the right templates, the right understanding of good product-centric data design. Data that can be holistic, understood just by itself in an autonomous way, but interoperable, that you can connect with other data products really easy. And also easily understood, data that can be picked up, has the right metadata tagging around it, that allows for any audience to quickly understand what that product is about. So those are some of the concepts around good product-centric data design, which are really important, and JP Morgan Chase is working with all of these data lake teams to make sure that they convert some of the existing lake data towards the right product design that's available in these catalogs for consuming use as well. Okay. So we'll talk a bit about getting started now, guys. We've spoken about mindset and the importance of flywheels, focusing on business value, gaining momentum, bringing the business along for the journey, changing that cultural mindset. We've spoken about people and process, innovating at scale by federating out accountabilities, creating 2 pizza teams embedded in your business, investing in automation to make a streamlined governance process that's still compliant. And we spoke about technology, loosely coupled data stores that are interoperable, not duplicating data across the organization, but classifying it through a common catalog so many different teams can access it. Here are some of the recommendations. Think big, start small, scale fast. Set those big visions, big, hairy, audacious goals, but focus on value and scale quickly by learning quickly. Work backwards from those big customer challenges. Understand what's most important to your business teams over the next 12 to 18 months, and work back from there to the right solution with data. Don't start by creating a data lake or a data platform and then trying to figure out how to use it. Do it the other way around. Foster data literacy through leadership principles and daily use of metrics in business decisions. In God we trust, all others bring data. Form a multidisciplinary team. Bring together those business, technology, and data skills that can be, individual in use and run really quickly within the business. And incentivize your data producers. Those teams that sit across the business might have a different cultural mindset to how they want their data used. They might have a legacy mindset that's all about, I'm worried that people will misinterpret my data if I make it more widely accessible. Work with those producer teams, change the way they're incentivized to think more around, I'm measured on how much my data is used, on the quality and the feedback I get from how people find my data to be valuable. And in time, as data producers lean into this more, they will see the net gain, because oftentimes producers are also consumers, and they'll see the benefit of being able to access others' data and therefore get the value and the incentive to push their own data out as well. Celebrate successes and build community. I spoke earlier around those first teams that come together. They're the evangelists. Publish blogs, make sure that people understand the value that's being delivered, and automate as much as you can to increase adoption into these marketplace models, into all of the new tooling that you create through your new data platforms as well. I'll quickly touch on the tenets for Amazon's transformation. So kind of going back to the Amazon story, these are some of the tenets that they established. And the reason why I wanted to bring this in here is because we see tenets being really important as the guidelines for change. They're essentially that set of rules that allow for teams to move independently and make decisions really quickly by referring back to them. So as you think about whether you're embarking, on your first data transformation initiative in your organization, or whether you're just looking at that next level of scale, that next level of advancement in data, think about the tenets you want to set for your data strategy across your organization. Some of the ones from Amazon were to provide an analytical ecosystem that scales with the Amazon business. And so every time they engineered any component or they designed any piece of their data platform, they referred back to this. Is this scalable? Is this going to meet with the growth of the business 2 to 3 years down the line? And if not, we need to think about how we're designing this. Their second tenet was around providing choice and options in analytic technologies. Like I was saying earlier, depending on where your different business consumer teams sit, they'll have different maturity and different needs. Give them the choice to use the right tool for the right use case, whether they're driving more advanced machine learning, if they're sitting in pricing, if they're in an insurance organization, or if they're just looking to drive and understand good reporting, if they're sitting in HR and need to just get a good reflection across FTEs across the organization, provide them with either the right machine learning or data viz tools or analytical tool that matches their need, and empower the business with autonomy and agility and insight, grow their maturity over time, decentralize governance, avoid bottlenecks across a highly distributed business. So these are all the things that Amazon saw as really important as they embarked on their transformational journey, and hopefully they are good points of reference for others as you think about your own. Okay, I'm going to finish off with the final slide, and this is just to talk about a program we have in AWS called D2E, or Data Driven Everything. It's a program I run in our data strategy team, and it's all about collaborating and partnering with our customers to create their own flywheels of change with data, to establish the right vision, to get mindset moving, to mobilize change really quickly. We work and we partner together with our customers by engaging with your business and your technology teams, working backwards from priority value points to think big, but to start small by showing value really quickly and scale up really fast as well. So wanted to share this for a second. We can share some more links out. There's a public website around the D2E, or the Data Driven Everything program, but it's an investment program we give out to all of our customers to allow them to partner with us as they think about scaling with data in the cloud. Okay, well, look, I'm going to leave it there. I hope that was really useful, and essentially just a good overview of the different key elements we see that need to come together in driving a modern data strategy. And what I'll do now is, I think we have about 13 minutes left. I'll hand back over to Mike and team and just see if there's any questions that require answering as well.
Well, I think that was, I think it met the billing, frankly. Craig, thanks very much indeed for that. I was just thinking how quickly time had passed because I was transfixed with what you were telling us. Now, we do have some questions, and I'm going to begin with the one that's right in front of me at the moment, and one that's in front of, it should be closest to people's minds because it's about the most recent subject. It's, what is your experience on introducing data ownership into an organization where it didn't really exist before? And what is the nature of the ownership that is required if you have a model producers, marketplace, consumers?
Yeah, so I think what I see often is the tendency is to think about solving for governance just for the sake of governance, which often is not the right thing, because talking to governance without thinking about the business value it's driving is hard to incent the business to lean forward into that. And so if you're thinking about driving out that first adoption for more data ownership into the business, the best place to begin is by thinking about where they need more value with data. And so, that might be an example like understanding a better product around sustainability data. I might be sitting in finance and I might be tasked with having to report on sustainability metrics and how we're performing to targets out to the city. And for me, it's critical that the governance around that data is great so that I don't make any mistakes in what I'm reporting out. But, engaging with me through that lens around how can we help you to do your job better, to get accurate, sustainability reporting out to the city, it makes the conversation of governance and data ownership a very different thing, because suddenly we're talking about something that's really important to their day job, and then we're talking about how data can help to fulfill it. And so that's an incentive for them to then lean in and for them to want to work with you more, to start to own that as a joint topic. Now, with that comes the other point that I mentioned earlier, in that there needs to be the right skills in the business as well. So it's one thing to focus on where there's value, but you also need to be focusing on how to provide them and equip them with the right training and skill sets, or the right people to help them to be independent over time as well. Hopefully that helps.
Well, we'll see if Richard comes back on that one. I hope that does help. Staying on data governance, though, I have a question that says, how do you build a data governance process that takes business results that uncover bad data, poor data, and take that back into the process of creating accurate, high quality data. And it goes down to that, back to, I think, that the sort of roots of the how do you build a data governance process that isn't just there for governance sake.
Yeah, I think feedback loops are hugely important as well. And so, we spoke about this modern data community earlier, and one of the key principles of that is allowing those teams that are consuming data to give feedback back to the producers. In Amazon's delivery of their solution for that on their Andes marketplace, consumers can actually star and rate the data product that they're using, and give it a rating out of 5 stars, as well as text kind of descriptions for asks that they need from the data. So that feedback loop is really important to give back to producers so they understand where the data might not have the right quality, might not be driving the right actions in the business. And so that's really important.
Yeah, super. Thank you. I think that's right. If you just sort of create effectively your own data governance silo, it doesn't really sort of achieve the aim in the round, does it? It's not providing that loop and feedback so that people need to sort of understand that the efforts are bringing rewards to the business as a whole.
Yeah, I would say the other thing as well is, as you continue to create products out of data which are used by the business, invest the time in thinking about how you'll measure success and value out of those products as well. And so, for example, if you're creating a product that serves the marketing business, so they're thinking about how they can improve engagement scores, better click-throughs, better open rates on some of the campaigns that they might be sending out, because they are targeting segments of customers in a better way through data. Think about how you capture the data that shows if that's adding value to that function as a feedback mechanism through the data governance as well. And so you want to create attributes on there around what is the click-through rate, what was the opt-out from customers when they received a campaign, how many of them were opened, so that those are all metrics that are part of that governance set around the data that are fed back not only to the marketing team but to the producer team, and they understand how effective that data is in business process.
Okay, super, thank you. And Tafor asks, Energy, the company who you referenced, built a common data hub on AWS. I suppose that's TVG to you. How do you reconcile the idea of a common data hub, but still accomplish decentralization and federation across the business?
I get this question often, and I'm almost inclined to ask Engie to change the name of their solution, because I think it's misleading. And so when they say a common data hub, what they're referring to is common data products, not a centralized data platform. And so what I mean by that is, whether I'm a producer of data in Germany or Switzerland or in the UK, I'm making my data available through a common ecosystem that subscribes and adheres to common templates for how I should structure wind energy asset data. But as a consuming team, I have the autonomy to subscribe to all of that data, provided that it's within my access and security profile, and use it within my market. And so if I'm sat in the UK and I want to access wind turbine energy data across all of the different plants in the UK, I can search and subscribe to that. I can also subscribe to facilities data that might talk about energy costs in particular facilities downstream from the turbines. But that data is not centralized. That's all being provided by different producer teams out there, but they're using a common platform and a common template for how they classify and structure that data in the catalog, so that I can access it quickly and independently. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does to me. I think we'll again find if Tafor has any questions on that. Linked to that, Billy asks, if you've got a centralized data function, how does the idea of the sort of the enterprise-wide data community sort of fit in with that centralized role?
Yeah, so I think if I understand the question correctly, if you have a centralized team, but you want to create an enterprise community, so there's a couple of things to unpack here. I think the one is a lot of people's end state vision is to actually, decentralize and to break away from centralization for all the reasons I was saying earlier around bottlenecks. But many organizations that don't have that maturity just yet to do so, and so centralized teams work just fine. But you still want to have a broader ecosystem of usage where there is discussion and innovation and topics. And so creating communities that go across the organization are a good way to do that, using things like guilds. So for example, you might have different data analysts or different data scientists that are scattered across the business. Maybe some of them sit in, marketing and customer service, some of them are in supply chain, some of them might be in other areas like pricing and fraud, depending on your industry. You want to have a guild for data scientists that can come together and can meet on an often basis, can share best practice around how they're using data, and can interlock with that central team around data as well to understand how they can work collectively to improve and uplift how they're running data science within all of their different business practices. So that's also a good way, by the way, to drive career growth, and run with the example we're going with data scientists. Often with data scientists, in a federated state, they might become disheartened over time by just focusing on just a particular business focus or particular business area. As advantageous as that is for the business to have someone who's really deep, as a data scientist, I might want to be understanding other areas in the business where I can also add value. And so by having guilds and communities of practice allows for people to understand other areas where they could maybe help to drive value in the business, other career paths where they could go elsewhere in the organization as well. And that's healthy.
So to a degree, what you're saying is having these data communities is in effect taking the centralization, if you like, the group, and just making it bigger, drawing in more people, so that there is this sort of common understanding, this common place, where supportive area where they could go, if you like. If I could draw an analogy with my society, where we reach out to people and from our central hub, and then try and bring in specialist people in teams, in small groups within the greater community to achieve answers.
Correct. Yeah, and that's healthy for discussion and for innovation of ideas. It's healthy for sharing best practice, which, to your analogy, hopefully, this forum, I think, serves a similar function.
Yeah. Cool. Our last question then is from, and I hope I don't massacre your name, it's from G Peng. Feedback is important. We've got that. We've discussed that. However, do you quality assure and control? How do you prioritize prior to you providing that data to the data consumers? So how do you sort of deliver the quality assurance and the control before you go back to the consumers with the feedback on the data?
Okay, so if I understand the question, probably it's like, how do you, if there are a lot of different quality issues that you need to address and tackle across the organization, how do you prioritize the right ones in delivering those to the business? And so this kind of comes back to some of the thinking I was talking about earlier around flywheels, where, you want to think about like an agile philosophy around deploying things minimally that are based on the highest value, the highest priority within the business, and start there to then scale. And so, for example, if uniquely identifying a customer is a real challenge for an organization, and being able to do that at high quality across all of the different areas that interact with customers, that's a focal area to start to improve firstly with on data and data governance. Is like, how do we create a single unique way of identifying, matching, and collapsing down to a singular record for a customer with governance? So that might be an example. And so you'd want to focus on that as a high value area, work with the business rather than doing it and then giving it to the business, because you need the business to be buying into that. deliver that, again, the feedback from that helps to inform where should I go next? You know, where is the next key area of governance that might be a challenge? So yeah, that's the idea there.
Brilliant. Okay, I think that's both us done in that it's the end of the hour. It's us done in that we've completed our questions. So I think it just leaves me to say thank you, Craig. I thoroughly enjoyed that presentation, and I hope we didn't put you too much on the line with some of the questions we had, but that does show that we had an engaged and interested group with you. If I hand over to Robert now, he can sort of give the sort of closing pieces and where people might find this recording in the next day or so.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Again, for our audience, you can visit the iscdo.org. That's our website for the International Society of Chief Data Officers, and we will be posting the presentation under videos, under resources when you go to our website. So, as always, please consider joining the ISCDO organization, and it just comes back to me, Mike, to thank Craig for his gracious time, and we look forward to hearing more great stuff from what Amazon Web Services is doing in the data strategy world. So thank you, Craig.
Thank you very much.
Craig. Great stuff.
Thanks
Very much indeed.
Okay, and thanks everyone. Okay, bye.
And thanks everyone for your time. Yes.
Bye.
Cheerio. Bye.